let's look at the Browns versus the Ravens. Now, this was a pretty interesting battle last year. Browns actually won the first game, and then the Ravens took the second one, but they were pretty competitive. So don't look at this game as one that the Ravens are just going to bowl over the Browns. I think this will be pretty competitive overall. There's a 48.5 over-under, so decently high projected points. The Ravens are projected to win by 8, 28-20 implied points there. Now, last year, the Browns were pretty bad against the run and against tight ends, but pretty good at stopping opposing receivers. And the Ravens were just boss all around, except for they did give up some points to fantasy receivers, but really good against stopping the run, tight ends, and quarterbacks. But that didn't really seem to apply too much when they played the Browns. Nick Chubb had that boss game against them. Kareem Hunt had another good game towards the end of the season. Jarvis Landry went off against them both times, even though Oda Beckham didn't have a great game. So, I mean, like I said, this was a pretty competitive battle between these division rivals. And sometimes you have to throw out stats like fantasy points against stats when you're talking about division games, because these guys play each other differently when they're playing within the division versus outside. So anytime we have a division game, it's like throwing another wrench into it. It can go pretty much any way. So what do we expect to happen this week? Looking at the Browns, I'm comfortable starting Nick Chubb. I know there's a lot of concern for those of you that drafted Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt goes out and gets a bag, and now people are worried, like, oh crap, is Kareem Hunt going to be the guy? Is he going to end up getting more carries than Nick Chubb? I don't think so at all. When you look at this roster, outside of Oda Beckham and Jarvis Landry, they really don't have a solid wide receiver 3. We know that Kareem Hunt was playing in the slot a lot in training camp, and they kind of want to use him in that regard. Chubb is still a very dominant runner. He was Pro Football Focus's #1 runner on the year last year. So don't sleep on Nick Chubb just because Kareem Hunt is there. These guys could both be very valuable for fantasy this year, and this is what we've been preaching since May. I like both Chubb and Hunt. Hunt was a better value because you could get him a few rounds later, but I still think that Nick Chubb has every shot possible to beat out Derrick Henry for the #1 runner on the year. They went out and acquired Jack Conklin, so this offensive line is going to be great. They bring in Kevin Stefanski, who instituted that zone run scheme that gave Dalvin Cook such a fantastic season last year. So even if Kareem Hunt is involved more so than like Alexander Madison was, Dalvin Cook was able to get the fantasy points that he did last year, finished #3 at the position with only 60% of the touches. So if it's a 60-40 split between Chubb and Hunt, both of these guys are going to be valuable. I like both of them. I like starting both of them this week. Obviously, I would start Chubb over Hunt, but try to get both of them in your lineup. I think they'll end up both having a good game. I like Oda Beckham, even though he didn't perform well against the Ravens last year. I like him to bounce back this year, and I think he does it starting week 1. Last year, he played the entire season hurt with a hernia, and I want to see what he looks like healthy with Baker Mayfield under a system where Baker isn't constantly getting murdered because his offensive line is terrible. I think Oda Beckham eats in this one, and I am comfortable starting him. Now, Jarvis Landry is someone who probably should be started. I'm just a little bit hesitant. I know he came off the PUP list. They're saying he looks good. I'm still just a little concerned that he's not fully back from that hip issue that could have potentially put him on PUP to start the year. I'm always a little bit hesitant to start players coming off of an injury in week 1. So if you can find a better option, I would probably try to avoid benching. I would try to avoid starting Landry this week. But if you have to do it, I don't hate you for it. I think I still have him ranked in my wide receiver 3 range. And then Austin Hooper, I just don't know exactly how they're going to deploy him in a game against the Ravens, who have a pretty solid linebacker core. Be a little bit hesitant to start Hooper this week. Let's see what kind of usage that they want to give him before we throw him in our lineups. And then, even though I'm expecting Mayfield to have a decent game, there's better options out there for quarterbacks. And unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, I'm not starting Baker Mayfield. I'm definitely not starting the Browns defense against Lamar Jackson. All right, now looking at the Ravens, you don't need me to tell you to start Lamar Jackson. If you do, then I don't know what to tell you. Now, Mark Ingram is a solid start in this one, even with J.K. Dobbins potentially getting a decent workload. I want to see how that split looks, but overall, I'm going to trust that they continue to give the ball to their lead guy last year. Mark Ingram was super efficient in this offense, and it makes sense. Like that zone read scheme that they run with Lamar Jackson is great for running backs. It's very hard for defenses to be able to zone in on the running backs when they know that Lamar Jackson is a constant threat of being able to take the ball himself. And that's what really helps running backs in these kinds of systems. Now, I do think J.K. Dobbins will eventually be that guy. But right now, week 1, we're going to trust our studs. You drafted Mark Ingram to start him. You're going to play him. Marquise Brown last year in week 1 barely had any targets, but still blew up for over 25 fantasy points. Now, it was against the Dolphins. The Browns are a little bit tougher in the secondary, but I'm still starting Marquise Brown. All reports across camp have been glowing. He put on tons of muscle. He came in at like 168 pounds last year, so getting closer to his actual playing weight. He's going to be a beast this year if he can stay healthy, and right now he's healthy, so pretty much a similar situation with all those other speedster guys that had the potential to blow up. You're always going to play them when they're healthy, and Marquise Brown is no exception. Mark Andrews absolutely torched the Browns last year, so I am most certainly starting Mark Andrews, and then I'd still be comfortable starting the Ravens defense. I think they have a good enough shot at getting a couple turnovers in this one, even though I am expecting the Browns to at least be somewhat competitive. I have Dobbins in my second guess category. I do think that he's going to get a decent amount of work this week. I don't know what that means. It could be anywhere between 5 to 15 touches, and what he does with those 5 to 15 touches could be anywhere from like 3 fantasy points to like 18 fantasy points. So with that range of outcomes, with that potential for the low end of him not doing too much on the touches that he gets, I would like to wait it out. If at all possible, you likely drafted him like 6th, 7th, or maybe 8th round, depending on how high he went in your draft. Most likely you have someone else that you can start over him. Try to wait this one out. Dobbins will eventually get his run, and when he does, we'll know. But for now, let's just see. They've been blowing a lot of smoke at us in terms of how they're going to use these guys. We have no idea what their plan is. I'm just going to go into this with the intention of waiting it out until Dobbins shows us that he's ready to go. Similar situation to Miles Sanders last year. You didn't recommend starting Miles Sanders until a couple weeks into the season. We're going to do the same thing with J.K. Dobbins. Try to bench him if you can. And then while I do think Miles Boykin has a chance of breaking out this week and could have a decent game, I'm going to wait and see whether or not it's going to be him or someone like Devin Duvernay or Willie Snead that gets the most targets outside of Brown and Andrews. It's just a wait and see game for that. All right. In terms of my prediction, I got the Ravens winning this one, of course. I do think the Browns keep it competitive, but in the end, I think the Ravens just continue to power through them, and the Browns can't keep up. So I got the Ravens covering their spread in this one, winning 34-23.